You are tuned in to the Story Behind the Business podcast, which is brought to you by the Westland Group and Agency Media. I am sitting here with my co-hosts, Joe McDonald and Adam Bessie.
Hello.
Yeah.
Today on the podcast, our guest is the president of Fusion Cine. His name is Byron Drinkle. Good afternoon, Byron.
Hey, Joel. Hey, guys.
Hey,
Byron.
Why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about what is Fusion Cine?
So Fusion Cine is the cultivation of many years of diversification of the film industry as we changed from film being the only way that production was done. With the advent of HD, production started to make that transfer over into HD. And so no longer was there a single format. Now there was two types of formats and not just a handful of the film cameras. And within HD, that diversified over years. Initially, it was a single camera, a few cameras that came out, and then that market completely moved towards HD and eventually 4K, 8K production, and film had largely gone away. Although it's come back more as a creative choice, because digitally you can create a lot and fake for film for looks and grain and such. So the Fusion Cine there was no longer a single way. I came up through film when initially it was film, and then with video and the transfer, came to a point when the technology became good enough. You could use small camera formats that came out. There was some digital camera formats, and then GoPro, Panasonic had a good one that had crossed over. So no longer, we were working on productions that were no longer a number of bodies and then crash housing or something. They're now going down to lower end productions. And then we had productions that were running 12, 15 cameras. They're running cameras that range from $1,500 up to $200,000, and they were mixing them up. And that was kind of the advent of Fusion Cine. There was no longer an individual way to do production anymore. It was very creative, many different tools, and as telling a story, building that content, and creating those images was much more like being an artist, where you're using different paintbrushes, different type of strokes to be able to create these different looks in order to make your story look different, stand out as a cinematographer, and have your production be noteworthy about anyone else's in this world jam-packed full of content coming at you all the time. So Fusion Cine is a company. We've been around really only for 6 years as Fusion Cine. Where beyond that, it was really a collection of friends that I've made through the industry and my 25 years in the industry, friends and peers. And we all had the same idea in this is, look, we've seen what everyone else is doing, but let's see if we can do this different. So it was a concept that brought and was able to develop, and over the last 6 years went from 1 to 25 employees, and we're now a national company in three large film production centers in Canada, doing the sale and rental of cameras and editing equipment.
Wow, that's a huge intro. But I think if you look at what excites me, obviously, as Leyland said, being kind of a camera nerd as well. When you hear about productions going on and you renting out film gear, it's kind of like this other world. But with the advent of digital video and cameras that can shoot in 4K or 6K, and almost every other month a new camera is coming out, for you guys to really tackle that market and do it successfully, were you looking to segment strictly to the film industry, or do you have a customer base of video production companies, hobbyists? Maybe you can kind of just tap into that a little bit for us, just to see, is it just the film industry that you're servicing, or is it kind of prosumers, consumers?
Sure. We deal a lot with the higher end, mid to high level production. As there's many, if you're a student, if you're weekend warriors, we call it, doing independent film production on the weekends, there's so many different venues out there that you can get. Now you can build a basic cinema package from London Drugs or Best Buy. You can quickly put stuff together, or people will, someone, maybe you, Adam, you bought a lens from B&H, and someone else bought a camera body from VizTech, and you're all put it together, and then you go out on the weekend. Everyone owns a little bit of something.
Yeah.
we can't always compete at the best price and being in stock. But for us, we're much more as working as a production partner. So we carry the top end down to mid-level, and I just call that in regards to price range and not necessarily quality, because your iPhone now is a great acquisition choice as well for basic videos. So it's a very wide range. That's part of the Fusion, but really that's our expertise, is working in consultation, working together with the production, the documentary, the reality show, being able to work together. What is the look that they want? What is the newest technology that allows them to do that? What do they have already? What can we utilize with that? Because if you want to just click online in the middle of the night in your underwear, that's really easy to do. But if you actually want to get together, do camera tests, do some lighting tests, hair and makeup, be able to do that together, that's what we can offer.
Nice.
So just a quick question, as someone who's not a camera nerd, as Adam said, does that mean that you're actually on set when they're producing these shows? Is that what that means? It's not just a rental. It's you're kind of fully integrated into the production.
No, we don't offer services beyond a little bit on the VisFX side, which is kind of a separate conversation. But we're a sales and rentals company doing consultation, rentals, and sales to the industry professionals that are on sets. And on set is high-end film production. On set is could be podcast. What you guys need for lighting, building the integration. Maybe you want pan-tilt zoom cameras in every room within your building there, that one person can take control and master control, ride the levels, be able to pan-tilt zoom. We can engineer and build that so you can have everything stream out live to the web.
As you can tell with the lighting in our podcast, we spend a lot of money on the production value here. That's a really fancy whiteboard behind Leyland. So Byron, a lot of people, we know that, this is Hollywood North. They film a lot up here. Leyland and Adam and I think we're experts because they film a lot of Hallmark movies in our building, so we get to see that. But even when they film Hallmark movies in our building, and I know they just bang these things out really quickly, it's still unbelievable to me the amount of people that show up, the amount of equipment, what they do for, I know what's considered in the industry to be this low budget, kind of lower end tier movie, and they still have a lot of people. And now with what's going on, everything is just halted as far as production goes. And so we're seeing, I'm imagine a lot of those people are just sort of out of work because there's just not. It's just the reality of kind of this crisis that we're in right now. How is that? What's it done for you guys? Like, how are you holding up at Fusion? How are you getting through this? What are your thoughts? And obviously being so tied to this industry that, just through no fault of anybody's, is now halted.
Yeah, it's was certainly a hard stop for us. It had started, the reality of it came up first when Tom Hanks and his wife got sick and they shut down production in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first kind of, oh crap, maybe this is going to hit closer to home. And then within the next week, there was Smallville and another show that closed down because there was someone on set. And then it was just a hard stop. So it had changed. I can't remember the specific dates, but between the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it went from, this looks like this is going to affect us to that's it. There's no more production that's going to go at that time. And we do many different levels of production, and we're diversified in the business that we do. The core of what we do is production that is built on either Indigenous production within Canada or Hollywood type production that's coming to Canada. We also deal with education, which is revolving around film as well as we do for corporate production. We work together and do some integration, as I mentioned, like for live web events, for that type of thing. On the rental side, we do documentaries, a lot of reality TV. So at least being diversified in that, because there's always a threat to the end of film production in BC. There's always something. It's an actor strike, it's a writer strike, it's whichever union, it's changes in government and the threat that they're going to change the tax infrastructure to stop business coming from to, well, to gain more money through taxes, but inevitably which would stop production coming through to Vancouver. So there's always a risk for something. So we diversified what we did. What we never saw coming was obviously a hard stop that you cannot do any production that involves a gathering of people, which really that encompasses in education, because you can do distance education, but it's very difficult to get all of your crew together to work together collaboratively on that. So there's going to be workarounds. That is just already workarounds to be able to start working within film production to get it up and running again.
Byron, so in terms of like thought on when stuff might get picked back up, has there been any rumblings in terms of like, okay, this production might start up, and you don't have to name the production, but like, are people calling to kind of book equipment, or is stuff getting delayed? Because obviously it's not like, oh, sometimes it could be, oh, we need something next week, but generally some of these productions are booking out a couple months in advance. Maybe you can kind of talk about the scheduling, and are people pushing it down for a couple of months, or is everyone just like, we have no idea, let's just wait and see?
It's come to a little bit of wait and see, but general productions are looking at June, July to start up production again, and looking at a number of different ways to be able to do it, because we're not going to be able to do production as previous to this pandemic, but there are other ways that could be worked around it. That would involve us to a smaller extent as production starts up again, but to all the other people that are fed in this huge hundreds of millions dollar annual industry, there's the florists that supply all the flowers, and maybe a quarter of their income came from that. There's all the different locations that they would go to, and different people, like your example at the Westland Group there, that you're counting on X amount of productions being able to come through. You've got companies like Hallmark that are doing 30 productions in a year, and they are what we consider as low budget, as $3 million, as very low budget, but they can bang through and do high quality. They've got great crews. They can get through these. And so all these companies, just like Westland, for example, is the company here on the podcast, you count on, get a regular count on. So all the spin-off industries have that as well. At least they're much more diversified than for us that are directly in production, which is the gathering of people together, typically.
You said something there that is kind of interesting, that, hey, it's going to be different when it comes back. And I think that's the one thing we're all learning, is the world has changed forever, good or bad, but just some things that we're going to do differently. Are people going to go to big events right away? Are people going to have realized they liked working out at home? Are people going to not go to restaurants so much? Now, the one thing I guess that's nice about the movie industry is people are proving they do like to consume a lot of content. And my guess is Netflix is doing pretty well right now, and Prime Video and Disney and all of that. You said that there's some thoughts around how to do it differently. Have they started to talk about what those things are that they need to do differently in order to get production up and running? Because I'm sure these production companies are like, man, we have this active audience, so we have no way to produce new stuff right now.
Yeah, it's in everyone's interest to get back onto content. Just to speak on the demand side, right now you've got large populace around the world who are at home consuming all streams of media. Companies like Netflix had a downturn in subscribership as Disney Plus and a number of other streaming agencies that had come out. So there was much more diversification of where all those funds were going. Now people are home and they're resubscribed at low cost to all these things. So talking to someone that was 6 months into this, it's a real comment for them to say, what have you been up to the last 6 months? And you say, oh, I watched Netflix. It's not that they watched something, they watched all of Netflix. So the demand for content is going to be huge. It's just, how do we do it in a safe environment? And this is some of the things, once we all realized that this was not a short-term, this wasn't a few month lapse, that this is going to be something that is going to be substantial for moving forward. We had to start discussing how are we going to do this in the new world that we live in? Because there's too much money and too many people with lives on the line, and there's content that's needed. So it's just a matter of how do you do that safely.
Yeah, no, I know that you're not on this side of things, but maybe just give the listeners an idea of, like, on any given time, how many productions are being filmed in Vancouver?
Typically between the union and non-union productions, typically in the range of 50 productions that are going on at any given time, a varying range of budgets. To give you an idea, like you said, in booking some places or some productions were booked a few months in advance. Typically, the studio space in Vancouver is booked almost a year in advance. So there's certain productions that are waiting to come to Vancouver, be able to utilize certain available crew or locations that they need, and they're already in queue. So the demands, and again, I'm just speaking about Vancouver on this. So we also deal, the story is across Canada. So it's the same story anywhere else, is that these key locations get booked up very early, and if you want those, then productions are waiting in queue.
And minimum amount of people working on a production, when we say there's a lot of people that are going to be, that are out of work or being affected by the halt, any given production, even on a small scale, you're probably seeing at least 20 to 30 the crew members, even on a micro budget feature or project or commercial, right?
Yeah, you're easy 20 to 100 people. It's not just the people who are sitting on set at any given moment that you might see on a EPK or behind the scenes. You have all the people who are prepping in their offices, construction who's building all the sets and flats, for other pyro who's building things, the production office. You know, it's they're large productions, even though you don't see that when you go on a set. You might see a ton of people and extras on set, but certainly it's much broader than just that collective. So there's a number of things that could be done much easier remotely, but it's more of the change in how the people that work in confined spaces will continue to do this in this new reality.
I have a question just to go a little bit back to your business, and you touched on this a little bit, but as your business is adapting to what a new normal looks like when production starts back up, are you already working on being able to supply your services in new ways? Like, are you going to provide that consulting in a different way? And have you had to set up technology for that specifically, or is it kind of just waiting right now to see exactly what it looks like?
Well, part of it, we're chatting on it right now. I've got meetings every day, most days, in regards to this way, both either with people within the industries, peers, or people within the company. Production, and trying to figure out, we have the technology that we can help productions deploy to be able to do things in a much more distance capacity. It's a matter of them being able to get to the point. How are they going to get everyone together to be able to run these smaller crews and be able to do that? So we have the systems, the technology, hardware in place to be able to sell it to productions, but we just need them to come back again first.
So I'm on your website, and you have a lot of stuff on here. One of the things you do sell stuff on your website. I'm just curious what the sales like are on. I mean, I guess you're selling to a very specific type of person. How are sales on the e-commerce side of things?
Well, for us, the only things that we've been moving is small streaming products, which is a very small part of what we do. Because of the size and costs of the items that we sell, like, low-end lenses are $1,500 to $2,000, going up to $80,000 for a single lens. So these aren't website type transactions, but we have them all on our website so that people can find them, because we are the only resource for a number of different products here within Canada, and we try to get them on our website so people see that where they normally resource the one or two dealers who sell them in the US, that there is now a Canadian source, because there wasn't historically a Canadian source before us.
What's the pulse like with the people right now in the film industry? Like, obviously everyone's, like you're saying, we're in this together, we're trying to stay positive, but like, what are some people saying? Are people now thinking that they want to go and find a different job, or some people having to go get construction? Maybe they're planning on like what's the chatter like right now? Because if obviously it's contingent on production starting, so if production doesn't start for another 7 or 8 months, say, well, that's not a good position for people to be in. What are some people saying? Is there a hysteria, or is everyone pretty cool and collected about it?
It really depends on who you are, what productions typically you come along with, the people that are hiring you, and for where they are in queue. There's some productions like the Hallmark, for example, they should be back operational by June, but they're looking at things for them is having isolated production. And so building compounds, and so they can actually live there 24/7 within a place. They can ship up the director, if there's a producer, and whatever key talent that's coming up from the States, and they can all isolate for 14 days, make sure to follow all the safety guidelines and everything for both the US and Canada, and then come within an area where the Canadian crew have been there isolating as well. And then within that, this little compound, you can have varying different sets. Within this crew, they can all have that close quarters situation that's required. Go to a couple of the verified places that they have deemed as safe or working exclusively. If it's a more, maybe there's not as much on location, there's some establishing shots of the outside of the building, and they just have to recreate a lot of it inside in the studio. So there are other ways to work around, and they can do this and roll this out fairly quickly to be able to do it, to make sure everyone is safe. But it affects everything from the way that catering is done is now would have to be boxed lunches. And there's a number of different things that would all have to be done, because you can't just run to the store, having your set deck runner constantly heading out. We need this and they need this. So you need to have time to get it out and sanitize it and have it sit and do everything. So there's so much last minute in film as they churn through a lot of these productions. So there's a lot of things to figure out, but there's also some instant solutions to get this working right away in that particular scenario.
That's really interesting, actually. I didn't really think about it that way, that, if you take people and you go somewhere and everybody waits 2 weeks, and I think one of the things we'll start to see hopefully soon is that the tests will become faster. You test people and go, okay, well, we're all fine, so we can all work together as this group and we can move on. That's really interesting. When you talk about, we had Adam Mills, who owns Four Winds Brewery, on here the other day. And one of the things he talked about was, and I think we all kind of know this, is craft breweries all kind of work together. And like they'll go and do a deal with Daggerad, and they'll go deal, and it's really cool. Like it's a very collaborative industry. It sounds like when you talk, is the film industry in Vancouver a fairly collaborative group that people are, chatting with and talking with each other?
Yeah, I would say it's both sides, but for the most part, it's very collaborative. Is because at the end of the day, whatever happens, for better or for worse, affects all of us. And so if you're not part of it's cliche, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So if we're all working together, then we can all lift each other up. And that's not just for now, that's at other times as well. It's because if we can all be moving in the same direction, it's much better than fighting against each other. So there are some people that don't play the same way in all departments and all companies. They don't share that philosophy. But overall, the gist is how can we do it? Because this isn't good for anyone. So how can we work together? We're all in it together. How do we do this to be able to restart film again and refund all those hundreds of millions of dollars through to the companies directly involved in all the spinoff?
Because you rent and you also sell gear, have you been noticing from some of your suppliers or vendors, like they're maybe giving you guys a little bit of a break on certain things, or they're offering different discounted deals so that you're still possibly going to be buying stuff? Like, maybe has any of that changed on your side of the business with the shift? I know there was a bit of time there where people were talking about certain software subscriptions that those companies were like deferring, rates for 2 months or things like that. I'm just wondering if there is something like that where Blackmagic or Sony or Red or Panasonic or any of your vendors are like, hey, you know what, we got you covered. Here's like a deal, or here's something that's happening.
No, for the most part, it's just been an industry hard stop. Right. There's a little bit of business that's going on here and there, but directly with film production. Some of the stuff we've had has been some selling some equipment to civil and to some independent producers that are doing things, documentaries on for reality of medical workers and different things at this time. But it's been pretty much, I would be generous if I said that we still had 1% of the revenue that we had going before this, even in the stuff that was going on. So it's been a hard stop. The industry, the companies, everyone has been put on pause. But for the industries that are more diversified, the Blackmagic was one of them, who have streaming devices and have had those for years, that was our doors, daily emails and phone calls while we were still in the office, and still emails now, of people looking for streaming devices. So the same way that in film production, we moved from having tapes be the deliverable format to go to the broadcasters, that when the tsunami hit, I can't remember what year it was when the Japan tsunami was, but that was the ending point for tape. That was pretty much the death of tape. Although, as you guys may have considered at that time, everything was digital, but still in the broadcast and film distribution, when you sent to festivals and such, you still dealt with high-end tapes, SR tapes and such, and now it all went files. So there's going to be a lot of things that are going to change in the way that we do business, the products, and just in this, where people that maybe weren't fully into web streaming before, like the biggest one for us was House of Worship. The amount of different types of churches and houses of faith that had contacted us going, we need to connect with our parishioners and our people. We're a community. How are we all going to do this? And we need to get out our messages and have everyone come together. So this is going to push people for that.
Yeah, we look at technologies like 360 video and things like that. And Adam knows this. I mean, how many years ago did you build the most expensive 360 camera when you took a whole bunch of GoPros and put them out to try and make our own? And
it wasn't that long ago either.
And I remember I remember watching this YouTube show. It was called The Average Joel Show. I don't know if you guys heard of it. Quite a few views. It was a pretty big deal. And we had a 360 camera there. And at the time, Adam was always telling me how big 360 was going to be. And I was always just like, I don't really see this catching on. Like, it hadn't really caught on. And now, one of the things they're saying is you're seeing a lot of like 360 cameras being used because, okay, you're a real estate agent. You need to show your home. You're like, all of a sudden it's like 360 is a huge thing where it's not a new technology, but it wasn't being used that much. And now it's like everybody's, meetings are using 360 cameras to try and give a better feel than just something like this. So it's interesting that, maybe some technologies that will take off, in the coming months. Byron, can we switch gears for a minute? You've been in the industry for 25 years. For the listeners out there, I've known Byron for, I don't know, 30 years, something like that. And I know that in all sorts of different capacities, you've been on sets, you've been around the movie industry, and I'm just curious about some of the things that you've experienced in your career. And I had written down a few things about like who's the funniest, who's the biggest jerk that comes to town. What's one of those moments that you just had like that was like, this is such a cool thing that I'm involved in? Like being on set or meeting somebody or seeing the way they film something?
More on the set side. I can't speak to any of the talents in regards to that. All I'll say is there's people all over the spectrum. Some of them are the way that you would expect them to be, and other ones, no one is to make eye contact with them, and it's distributed in a very negative fashion. So it is very diverse. Just like any workplace, you get all sorts of different people. Film or fame just amplifies that. More of my wow factors have been some of the sets that the production designers and production team have come up with an idea, and you walk in to the stage that was empty last month, and you walk in and there's a 3-story prison. I walked into all sorts of different things, and just the detail that's involved. I'm more jaded by it now, but it's still just the amount of time, effort, and money that go into it. And the detail is everything went from standard definition to HD. All of a sudden, the stuff you could get away with that was maybe soft focus in the background, now you had to be very detailed. So just very, very cool locations. The only thing that I thought about passing on, it was just funny because we watched a little TED Talk about Kevin Bacon the other day. I remember I had an office, North Shore Studios or Lionsgate Studios. I can't remember what they were called at that time. And I'm sitting in our lunchroom of our office there, and I looked over. We had our table on one side of this glass building, and there was a picnic table on the other side. And I hadn't really paid attention. I was talking to someone, and they pointed out, they go, "Hey, there's Kevin Bacon sitting next to you." But we're sitting on each side of the glass. And of course, it's spurred all sorts of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon because I was sitting side by side. But
was he eating bacon?
He was eating, but I didn't see what he was eating. That memory had come back. That was from a long time ago. But.
Whenever they film something at our office and there's a celebrity, they make me work from home.
Leyland has these celebrity crushes that are bizarre. It was like Winnie Cooper from the Wonder Years was in our building, and you would have thought it was Brad Pitt or something, and it was like a little kid.
Oh, great. It was so great. And then Heather Graham was there. Yeah, good times.
Oh, probably one of the coolest days for me was all within the same day. My office had a window that opened up into a breezeway, and the Muppets were filming next door. And then the son of Jim Henson was there in the breezeway doing a radio interview. And so I can see him out the window, and he's going between the voices. But as I looked at my computer in front of me, I can hear Kermit, Miss Piggy, and I look, and I can see him out the window. And I'm like, wow.
That's cool.
Because I had been on the set, and the set was really cool because everything's elevated, so the puppeteers can walk underneath the sets. So it was just a different set to be able to see that, but have that combination to be able to hear him do the interview, go through, and be able to see him do that. That was pretty cool. And then Snoop Dogg came by, so that was that was kind of both my childhood and my teens all erupted at one time. So
that was a great day. Byron, with all this time that you've had then, obviously without being able to, with, like you said, outside of maybe a few conference calls here and there, what's been a few things that you've allowed yourself to just binge watch or binge listen to or read? What are you consuming right now?
I don't sit still well, so I don't really binge much. I try to get to some TV series and such, but I don't spend much time in front of the computer or television, which is a little ironic since I've been in media for years. I don't consume a lot of it personally, but just more how do we keep this going? How do we be relevant? How are we all going to make an income and moving it forward? So it's been a lot of discussions, trying to work some community groups, discussions on how are we going to do this and move forward. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of people leading it. There's a lot of people who are working within the productions who want to get them back up again, but not everyone is sharing the same conversations. So the more that we can share these ideas and figure out how we can get people back to work and how is the best and safest way to do it. We don't want anyone to be at risk. We want to be able to do this more for distance. How do we reduce costs? And it's going to reduce some additional equipment costs, but you could do it with reduced crew. You could do it with reduced travel. There's a number of different ways that you can do it. So it's just trying to engage that. If this goes on a long time for that, I may finally be able to unwind, but I haven't, unfortunately, to this point.
Well, right on. Well, Byron, we wanted to thank you for coming on the podcast. We're pushing up our time here. I know Adam and I could talk about the movie industry all day long in Vancouver. Adam could ask you a million questions on cameras. But hey, you know what? There's industries out there, and it's really weird where all of a sudden some industries are flying and some have just died, and there's just nothing you can do about it. And I'm sure it's a difficult time to try and figure this out as the president and try to figure out how do you come back and to deal with all of this uncertainty. So good luck to you, man. Thank you very much for coming on. And maybe once the production start again, we'll get you back on and hear how you guys you made it through this.
Sure. We'll let you know how everything's banging at that time.
Right on. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks, guys.